really need to happen? Because when a franchise becomes successful, audiences always worry about the same thing. Is this a real continuation of the story, or is it just another sequel made because the name is popular? And that is exactly why Kung Fu Panda 4 is interesting to talk about. Because this movie is not just about Po fighting another villain. At its core, it is about something much deeper. What happens after you become the hero? That is actually a very smart theme. Most stories focus on the journey of becoming special. But Kung Fu Panda 4 asks a different question. What happens when you already achieved your destiny? What happens when the dream came true, and now life asks you to grow again? That is where Po's character becomes interesting. In the beginning of the franchise, Po was the underdog. He was awkward, funny, unexpected, and completely different from the traditional idea of a warrior. That is why people loved him. He did not become great because he looked perfect. He became great because he learned to believe in himself. But now, in Kung Fu Panda 4, Po is no longer that same beginner. He already became the dragon warrior. He already saved the valley. He already proved himself. So the challenge in this movie cannot just be, can Po win another fight? That would be too easy. The real challenge is this: can Po become something more than what he has been before? And that is what gives this movie emotional value. Po is in a strange place now. He is powerful, respected, and experienced. But growth does not stop just because you reached one goal. Sometimes the next step in life is even harder than the first one. Why? Because the first time, you were fighting to prove yourself. The next time, you are fighting to let go of the version of yourself that made you successful. And that is difficult for anyone. This is why Kung Fu Panda 4 feels less like a basic rise to power story, and more like a story about transition. Po is being pushed toward change again. Not because he failed, but because success itself creates a new responsibility. That is a very real-life lesson. A lot of people think growth only happens when life is hard. But sometimes growth happens when life is good, and you are still asked to evolve. That is scary, because it means you cannot live forever inside your old identity. You cannot keep repeating the same victory and call it growth. And Po, as a character, represents that struggle really well. He is still funny. He is still lovable. He still has that clumsy charm that made people connect with him in the first place. But underneath that humor, this movie gives him a more mature challenge. He is learning that being a hero is not only about fighting enemies. Sometimes it is about preparing others, trusting others, and stepping into a new role. That is where the movie becomes meaningful. Now let's talk about one of the strongest things in the Kung Fu Panda franchise in general, its themes. This series has always been better than people expect. On the surface, it looks like a fun animated martial arts story. But underneath, it keeps returning to themes like identity, destiny, insecurity, inner peace, self-worth, and growth. That is one reason these movies connect with both kids and adults. Kids see the action, the comedy, the animals, and the colorful world. Adults see something else. They see fear of failure. They see imposter syndrome. They see the pressure of becoming who life asks you to become. And Kung Fu Panda 4 continues that tradition. Instead of making Po repeat the exact same emotional journey, the movie pushes him into a new stage of life. And honestly, that is the only way a sequel like this can work. Because a good sequel should not just ask, what bigger enemy can we create? It should ask, what new truth can this character learn? That is the difference between a loud sequel and a meaningful one. Another reason this movie works is because Po remains relatable. Even after everything he has achieved, he still feels human. Not literally human, of course, but emotionally human. He still doubts. He still reacts emotionally. He still has to process change in his own awkward way. And that is important, because if a hero becomes too perfect, audiences stop feeling connected. Po has always been powerful because he never feels unreachable. He is strong, but he is also vulnerable. He is wise sometimes, but he is also confused sometimes. He can save the day, but he can also feel lost. That balance is what makes him memorable. Now, let's talk about the bigger message of Kung Fu Panda 4. For me, the movie says something simple but powerful. Your next purpose may require you to become uncomfortable again. That is hard to accept. Most people want success to feel like arrival. They want the story to end with, now everything is settled. But real life does not work like that. And neither does Po's life. Every new stage asks for a different version of courage. At first, courage was believing in himself. Now, courage may mean letting go, trusting change, and becoming more than just the warrior people already know. That is why this movie is not just about action. It is about identity shifting over time. And I think that is something many people can relate to. Maybe you reached a goal you once dreamed of. Maybe you became successful in your own way. Maybe you finally proved yourself. But then life asks a new question. Who are you now? Can you still grow after becoming the person you wanted to be? That is a deeper question than most animated sequels even try to ask. So, is Kung Fu Panda 4 perfect? Not necessarily. Different viewers will have different opinions. Some people may compare it to earlier films. Some may prefer the emotional impact of the older movies. Some may miss certain dynamics from previous chapters. That is normal, but even with those comparisons, this movie still has something valuable. It understands that Poe's story cannot stay frozen. He must keep changing, and that is what keeps the franchise alive. In the end, Kung Fu Panda 4 reminds us of something important. Becoming the hero is one journey. Knowing what comes after that is another. And maybe that is the real lesson here. Growth does not end when you win. Growth begins again when life asks you to become more than your old success. And Poe, once again, shows that true strength is not just about power. It is about accepting change without losing yourself. That is why Kung Fu Panda 4 matters. Not because it gives us another fight, but because it asks what comes after victory. And sometimes, that is the hardest battle of all.